There are quite a few Canon EF to Sony E mount adapters on the market, including ones that support autofocus. In this video I'll take a look at one of those adapters, in particular KNF Concept Mark IV. I've been using this adapter on my Sony a7 IV full-frame camera, so today I'll share my experience with such a setup. Of course, I will go over the design and capabilities of this adapter, and then I'll tell you what I like about it and what I'm not exactly impressed about. Hello and welcome to the channel. A quick disclaimer, this video is not sponsored by anyone. I bought this adapter about a year ago with my own money, and now after about a year of using it on my Sony a7 IV, I thought I'll record a quick review of this very useful accessory. For a bit of a background, before this adapter I had a go at Viltrox autofocus adapter, and that one didn't work at all on my a7 IV. Then I tried Metabonds adapter, which basically gave me very similar but much less stable performance compared to this KNF adapter, and because Metabonds was also about 2.5 times more expensive, it had to go back. So this KNF adapter is kind of last man standing, of course, until I get another one to replace it. And needless to say that such adapters give us access to a very rich collection of EF as well as EFS mount glass, which mostly more affordable compared to Sony E lenses, and of course include lenses not just from Canon but also from other manufacturers like Tamron and Sigma. And I have here two of my favorite and super affordable and very capable Tamron lenses, 28-75 f2.8 and a telephoto zoom 70-300. In terms of the price, it is sold online for about £199 here in the UK and for about $190 in the US. Well, currency conversion rules don't seem to apply here. It is also available on AliExpress for about $150 give or take, and all the product links where I can find this adapter I will put in the description of this video. So the body of adapter has a full metal construction and feels of good quality. The mounts on both sides are made out of metal and have a high polished finish, which should reduce wear of the camera and lens mounts. Now, there is no weather sealing here, so yep, don't take it in the rain. On the inside, the adapter is well covered with a light-absorbing matte black paint, which pretty much eliminates any strange ghosting that can be caused by the reflective surfaces inside of the light tunnel. Now, the adapter also has a USB port, which in theory should allow for firmware upgrades when such become available, of course. However, I must say that I had this adapter for more than a year and there were no firmware upgrades so far. The tripod mount at the bottom of the adapter is also very handy for cases when the lens is quite substantial but doesn't have a tripod mount of its own, like this Tamron 70-300 is a perfect example. Attaching the adapter to the tripod instead of the camera will definitely help to reduce stress on camera mount. In regards to functionality, before we look into autofocus capabilities, it is important to note a few things. So, first, the good news is that we have a full electronic control of aperture, and also, if we have an optical stabilization in the lens, like I have here on my Tamron 70-300, then the adapter manages to relay to camera if the lens stabilization is on, and camera then automatically disables the camera IBIS, and vice versa. So, we can choose if you want to use camera IBIS or lens optical stabilization by just flicking the switch on the lens, which I found quite handy. And all the relevant lens data is being passed via the adapter to the camera. I'm talking about things like aperture and focal length. So all this works pretty well. Now, in regards to autofocus capabilities, we have a button here which enables switching between contrast and phase detect autofocus. It is great that such a switch is possible, however, it is not the most user-friendly implementation. Having said that, the Metabonds adapter, which, as I mentioned earlier, is about 2.5 times more expensive, actually works in a very similar manner. So, according to the user manual, this adapter, when we attach it to the camera, will automatically skip to the corresponding mode. So, for cameras with phase detect autofocus, it will go into the P or phase detect mode, and for cameras without the phase detect autofocus, it will automatically go into the C, or that is contrast detect autofocus mode. Well, the thing is that it is not how it works on my Sony a7 IV. Even though Sony a7 IV has a very capable phase detect autofocus, this adapter tends to always default into the contrast detect mode, which on some occasions is useful and on some it can be quite annoying. I will explain why in a moment when we look at support for video and stills photography. And to switch between phase and contrast detect modes, the way it's suggested in the user manual, we will need to first switch off the camera, then we'll need to remove the adapter from the camera and then reattach it back. Then we'll need to press and hold that CP button while switching on the camera. Well, in my experience, I found that I can simply switch between the modes by holding the button while detaching and reattaching the adapter back to the camera while it is still on. Unfortunately, there is no way of telling which mode adapter is in by just looking at it, so the only way to figure out if I'm in a contrast or phase detect autofocus is by switching the camera into video. And if the continuous autofocus is available, then most likely the adapter is in the contrast detect mode, because so far, from my experience, this adapter does not support phase detect autofocus in video mode on my Sony a7 IV. So I will talk about phase detect for stills in a second, but even in the contrast detect mode, the autofocus for stills photography is quite capable. However, it does tend to hunt a little bit, especially when we have a challenging subject, like performing an eye detect on someone with glasses or some hair falling over the face. And that's usually how I can tell that adapter again defaulted into the contrast detect mode. However, once we switch to the phase detect autofocus mode, this adapter performs really well, basically to a full potential of the camera and the lens, doing all those cool things like eye detect autofocus on birds, animals and yes, even humans. I would go as far as to say that for stills, the performance in phase detect mode is sufficient enough for commercial work, in particular for event photography. Okay, possibly it might be a bit challenging for a wedding photography when a lot of people dancing in a very low light, but for something a bit slower paced, it will do well. For example, I used it to photograph a VIP function for art gallery opening and it performed really well. Now, when it comes to video, things are definitely much less encouraging. So it looks like only contrast detect autofocus is supported for video. If we switch the adapter into the phase detect mode, then the focus mode selection on camera will lock in manual focus only. So what are our options then? Well, we of course can switch into the manual focus and record a video that way. Definitely not ideal for commercial high-pace environments, however completely adequate for recording friends and family, even some wildlife, as long as it doesn't move too much or too fast. As for the contrast detect autofocus mode, well, I found it quite unreliable. Sometimes the lens will actually lock in the focus and keep on continually focusing on the subject, but only for a few minutes. However, just as I start getting comfortable, the lens will start hunting and lose the focus completely. A third kind of compromise approach that I resorted to when I use this adapter to record myself is by connecting the remote app to the camera and then tapping on the subject matter, that is my face, and locking the focus that way, and then switching to manual focus. So using this approach, we can focus on our face without much fuss. However, this approach also assumes that we will not be moving too much in and out of the focus plane when we deliver our lines. Right, so what's my verdict? Well, I think it is a very capable adapter, especially for stills photography. I pretty much covered all the positives and some negatives so far. However, here are a few points that I think is useful to know if you are considering this adapter. So, while the data link between the camera and the lens is very reliable, on some very rare occasions I noticed that the adapter will report the aperture slightly off by 0.2. It is easy to see, especially when we observe aperture of f3.8 on the lens that is only capable of maximum aperture of f4. Not a biggie and only happens sometimes on some lenses. Also, when I switched a lot between autofocus modes and between stills and video modes, especially during quite involved wildlife photography sessions, I had the camera freeze on me a couple of times in the last 12 months. Simply by attaching and reattaching the lens or removing and reinserting the battery usually solved that problem, and I've never had this problem if I was only shooting stills, even in a high demand situation. So, not a big issue, and like I pointed out, only happened to me twice in the last 12 months. And of course, it would be great to hear about your experience with this adapter. Do share with us in the comments. And if you want to see my full review of this very budget-friendly and seriously capable Tamron telephoto zoom, do check out my video. I'll put a link on the screen somewhere around here. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so. We need to get to those 1,000 subscribers. Take care, and I will see you in the next video.